Imagine a world where humans weren't the only humans. Across the frozen plains of Ice Age Europe, something might have been watching. Something almost like us, but not quite. Stronger, tougher, wilder. For over 300,000 years, Neanderthals ruled the world. And even though they disappeared thousands of years ago, their story isn't over, because a part of them still lives in us. Among all human species that once walked the earth, Neanderthals hold a unique grip on our imagination. Maybe it's their resemblance to us, or the fact that they weren't just distant ancestors. They were close relatives, so close that many people today carry fragments of their DNA. While exact dates are debated, most experts agree Neanderthals lived across Eurasia from about 400,000 to 40,000 years ago. Most of this period falls within the Chobanian stage of the Pleistocene epoch, a time shaped by intense glaciations, bitter climates, and enormous animals like mammoths and giant rhinos. Eurasia back then wasn't just cold, it was dangerous and teeming with predators. Yet Neanderthals didn't just endure it, they adapted so effectively that they became, in many ways, stronger and tougher than modern humans. If they were alive today, we might even call them superhuman. From afar, they might not have looked very different, but up close, the contrasts were clear, especially in size and build. On average, Neanderthals stood about 5.5 inches shorter than modern humans. Still, they weren't small. The tallest specimen we found, Ahmoud 1, measured around 5 feet 10 inches, which was actually tall for the time. But it wasn't their height that stood out, it was their mass. Neanderthal males weighed up to 183 pounds, and females about 146 pounds, roughly 20% heavier than Homo sapiens. Not because they carried extra fat, but because their bodies were densely packed with muscle and bone. Their skeletons were built like tanks. Nearly every bone was thicker and heavier than ours, sometimes twice as dense. Areas like their shoulders, thighs, arms, chests, and kneecaps were especially massive. Their entire frame spoke of raw, physical power. Despite being shorter, Neanderthals were built like power lifters. Their bones weren't just heavy, they were structured for strength. They had wide chests, thick limbs, broad shoulders, and powerful arms and triceps, clear signs of exceptional muscle development. Researchers agree, Neanderthals were much stronger than we are today. That strength had a purpose. Neanderthals hunted using close contact methods. Unlike Homo sapiens, who later relied on projectiles, they charged massive animals with heavy spears, facing down rhinos, wild horses, prehistoric elephants, and the mighty woolly mammoth. Imagine going after a fur-covered beast the size of an African elephant, using only brute force. And this intense lifestyle left its mark. Many Neanderthal skeletons show exaggerated arm development, especially in the upper body, possibly the result of years spent hurling heavy spears. Some scientists believe this wasn't just due to effort, but biology. Research suggests Neanderthals may have naturally produced more growth hormones. That would help explain their large frames and possibly their ability to perform incredible feats, like carrying 50 pounds of meat for 30 miles. That's like walking 138 laps around a soccer field with a heavy sack on your back. With chests and shoulders like theirs, many scientists believe Neanderthals would have excelled at wrestling or powerlifting. Estimates suggest an untrained male could bench press 500 pounds and a female around 350 pounds without ever entering a gym. For reference, even elite modern athletes rarely match that. But their physical power wasn't just impressive, it was essential. These bodies were incredibly durable. They didn't just kill, they survived. Studies of Neanderthal bones revealed something remarkable. Between 79% and 94% showed signs of severe trauma, blunt force injuries, fractures, even amputations, and most had healed. That means they endured extreme damage and kept going. One of the most astonishing cases involved an elderly male who had lived through a lifetime of suffering. As a young man, he lost his right arm, broke his left collarbone, and suffered facial injuries so bad he was blinded in one eye. He also endured repeated head trauma that left his ears sealed shut with bone, rendering him completely deaf, likely a mix of close-range hunting, fights with other Neanderthals, and encounters with predators. In fact, one study showed 74% of Neanderthal skeletons had evidence of violent encounters with wild animals. 21% bore injuries likely from big cats, 17.7% from wolves, and 36% from bears. Yet in most cases, it wasn't the animals hunting Neanderthals. It was the other way around. They weren't passive victims. They were fierce, bold hunters. That alone tells us a lot about their courage and their resilience. And the toughness didn't end with bones and muscles. Their skin may have been thicker too. Certain Neanderthal genes found in modern humans are linked to thicker skin, stronger nails, and denser hair, all traits that would have helped them withstand freezing weather and physical injuries. Their joints were also unusually large, allowing for strength and range of motion that's difficult or impossible for us today. While their hands weren't much bigger, they were shaped differently. Neanderthals had broad fingertips and thumbs that angled outward more than ours. That likely made precise tasks harder, but gave them outstanding grip strength. They may not have sewn clothing, but they could easily crush what they needed to hold. But their advantages didn't stop with brute strength. Neanderthals were also built to breathe like machines. Their barrel-shaped chests housed larger rib cages and powerful lungs. Studies estimate they had about 20% more lung capacity than modern humans. In some cases, it was even greater. The Neanderthal known as Kabara II is thought to have had a lung capacity of 9 liters, about 40% more than a modern adult male. Until recently, the largest ever measured in an athlete was 8.5 liters. Neanderthals weren't just strong, they were living, breathing oxygen tanks. Their noses played a key role in this. Long and wide, their unique nasal structures allowed for high airflow, twice as efficient as ours. This design helped them take in more oxygen with each breath and also warmed and moistened the frigid, dry ice age air before it reached the lungs, a built-in climate control system. But why do they need so much air? Because their large muscular bodies burned energy fast. Bigger bodies lose heat more slowly, but also require more fuel and oxygen. And that leads to another extreme trait, caloric needs. Neanderthals didn't just eat more, they had to. Researchers estimate they required 4,500 to 6,700 calories a day just to survive. That's up to 3 times what a modern human needs. If they lived among us today, nutrition labels would probably come in 2 versions, one for Homo sapiens and one for Neanderthals. Now you might ask, with such lungs, were Neanderthals endurance runners? Could they chase prey over long distances like early Homo sapiens? Actually, no. Neanderthals weren't built for stamina, they were built for power. Their anatomy tells the story. Their toes were broad and long, helping them stay grounded during each step, providing better traction and more explosive launches. Their legs were short and solid, unlike the long, slender legs typical of marathon runners. Even their Achilles tendons, the tendons that help modern runners store energy, were built differently. Neanderthals had long, narrow tendons, which are less efficient for endurance. In contrast, modern endurance athletes have short, thick tendons that act like springs. In short, Neanderthals were sprinters. They weren't made to run far, but to move fast and hit hard. That specialization ran deeper, right into their muscle tissue. Like us, they had both slow-twitch and fast-twitch muscle fibers. The slow ones help with stamina, the fast-twitch ones deliver bursts of strength. And in Neanderthals, fast-twitch fibers seem to have dominated. Genetic and anatomical studies suggest they were tuned for explosive strength, ideal for ambush attacks and close combat hunting. If you ever race a Neanderthal, your only hope would be distance, because in a sprint, you wouldn't stand a chance. But for all their brawn, Neanderthals weren't simple-minded. In fact, their brains were slightly larger than ours. A typical Neanderthal male had a brain volume of around 100 cubic inches, while females averaged about 89 cubic inches. That's roughly 30% more than today's average for Homo sapiens. Of course, brain size doesn't directly equal intelligence, but it is a clue. And these big brains weren't just for show. Neanderthals used them well. They coordinated complex hunts, crafted and used advanced tools, likely cared for the sick and injured, and probably communicated with one another in ways far more advanced than we once assumed. Some even created symbolic art. So why didn't their large brains make them smarter than us? Because their brains weren't just bigger, they were shaped differently. Their skulls were more rounded at the back, with forward-projecting faces. This may have influenced how their brains were organized. Many scientists believe Neanderthals devoted more of their brain power to sensory processing, especially vision and smell. They also had very large eyes, about 15% bigger than ours. That likely gave them sharper sight, better depth perception, and possibly enhanced night vision. But big eyes require a lot of brain power, so it's possible much of their brain volume supported high-definition vision, not abstract thought. Their long, wide noses also contributed to their distinct skull structure. To support those heavy heads, they had thick, muscular necks. Their faces followed the same pattern: large jaws, big teeth, and powerful chewing muscles. You might assume that such jaws meant an incredible bite, but surprisingly, studies found that their bite force wasn't much stronger than ours, around 700 newtons, similar to the upper limit of modern humans. So why such large teeth? One theory is that Neanderthals used their teeth as a third hand. They likely held objects like hides, tools, or meat between their front teeth while working with both hands. Wear patterns on their incisors don't match chewing and appear only in Neanderthal remains. Their front teeth were broad and rugged, built for gripping and manipulating, not just eating. And speaking of eating, Neanderthals were hypercarnivores. Up to 70% of their diet came from meat. That's an extraordinarily high percentage for any human species, past or present. Their huge caloric demands, powerful muscles, and cold surroundings made a high-protein diet essential. Without meat, they simply couldn't function. Now, that brings us to another question. If we carry Neanderthal DNA today, does that mean we inherited some of their traits? Their strength? Their appetite? Not exactly. Most studies show that Neanderthal DNA has only mild effects on modern humans. It might influence appearance or athletic ability in subtle ways, but no one's turning into a caveman from a few ancient genes. That said, new research suggests their DNA may still shape how our bodies work. Some inherited genes affect our metabolism, immune system, or even how we respond to stress and sleep patterns. But these effects are still being studied, and scientists don't always agree. What's not debated is this: Neanderthals were extraordinary. They weren't mindless brutes. They were strong, intelligent, adaptable, and some of the most resilient humans to ever live. Their story's not just in our genes, it's in our very definition of what it means to be human. In the end, Neanderthals weren't just ancient bones or primitive relics. They were builders, hunters, caretakers, survivors. They braved fire and ice, fought beasts larger than buses, endured wounds that would leave most of us crippled or dead, and yet they healed, adapted, and kept going. They thrived in conditions we would barely survive, all while raising families, crafting tools, and carving out a life in one of the harshest environments in human history. They didn't write books, but their legacy is written in our bodies, etched in our genomes, shaping subtle parts of how we live, breathe, heal, and survive. They weren't so different from us, so the next time you catch your breath after a sprint, or feel the burn in your muscles after lifting something heavy, or stare into the fire and imagine those who came before, remember, you might be more Neanderthal than you think. And maybe, just maybe, they're still with us, somewhere deep down. If you found this journey through our ancient past fascinating, leave a like, subscribe, and stay tuned, because there's so much more history waiting to be unearthed.